Hello, dear friends. I just make the greetings in Portuguese to start. And today, welcome to this conversations. We'll suppose and we'll try to be elevated for everyone. And I want to thank my dear friend Richard David Betts, who give us the pleasure to be here. And he is he's an American, a Peruvian, but an American. And I will let you guys discover that by his own expression. And I just want to say that he came to Portugal in January 1980. So almost half of his life he spent it here. So as you can see, he's a very experienced man. So he has quite of experience to share with us. Richard, we're going to have a conversation about life.
Okay.
All right. So first of all, please make an introduction about yourself because you can do it a little.
Well, I have a difficulty being able to summarize a life that began in Lima, Peru. I was educated starting at 7 years old in upstate New York. I've been to university, the first technical university in the Western world, called Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I ended up living in California with expertise in superalloys, and I was able to help determine whether a superalloy, a specific superalloy, was suitable for a rocket engine. So at a very young age, I was given a special honor, as well as I was no longer eligible to be drafted into the military service of America because it was more important that I assist NASA with putting a man on the moon. Oh. So that gives you a summary up to that time. I remained in the technical world until, essentially I resigned in 1979, and I traveled during December until I finally reached in Paris in January 1980, where I had purchased a car that was waiting for me, and I drove it down through France, across Spain, into Portugal. And that's how myself and my family, wife and 3 children, how we got here.
What made you to have that decision to come to?
Well, I had decided because of my fortune to have a heritage that was both American in the South and American in the North. And living in the States, particularly in the southern part of California, I wanted my children to also experience what I experienced as a child: multiculture.
Okay. So
that meant, well, it was time for me to consider living somewhere else for a while. And I decided that I was offered a very nice job and I could live anywhere in Europe that I wanted. And I decided that Portugal would be the place I would come to. And the reason was essentially easy from a standpoint of if you want to understand why you would do something. My visit to Portugal, the first visit to Portugal as a member of staff looking at creating things for space, as well as living in Southern California, which is full of many activities. You know, you as you know, Hollywood is there. You can go skiing in the morning and swimming in the afternoon in January, because If you live on the coast, you go into the water in the afternoon, and you drive up to the mountains, which are really high, and the snow is there. You ski. So it's a place in which you're exposed to multiple experiences. Universities are wonderful. The ability to drive everywhere, but it is not the center of the universe. So I wanted my children to be able to have a broader exposure.
Exposure.
So I ended up coming here because I made a visit, and I think it was a 1970. I can't quite remember the date, but I was asked to help somebody look at something that was being packaged, a porcelain object, and many of them arrived broken. And my friend says, "Well, you're an engineer and you're working on NASA level stuff. You must be able to." I said, "Well, let me see what it is that you want to do." And I looked at it and I studied it, and I said, "Okay, I think I can solve that problem." So I visited for a week or so, and I was one of the places. Flew into Portugal. We were staying at a little hotel called, what is the name of that little nice place in Lisbon? But and we had beautiful rooms, and food was delicious. And then we drove up north to where the Vista factory that made the porcelain was. And I was introduced to the people who packing, and they took me down, and I showed them, and we packed up a porcelain item. They tossed it into the air, hit the floor, then they opened it up, and it was not broken.
Wow.
So we all celebrated, and I got a very nice gift from the factory of Vista where we were. And that was it. And I noticed during all the time that I was in Portugal, everything was very quiet. It reminded me of the coast in California because the trees were the same. Here in Portugal, we had hills, high hills, but in California, there are mountains. So that was a distinct difference. But what was really interesting, and this is a very nothing to many people, but it's an important moment. The coffee was one of the best cups of coffee I had had anywhere on planet Earth.
Well, I'm in love with coffee.
And that was, it was a minor thing. And then the other thing that was very nice about Portugal, when we ordered fish and they said it was fresh, I had never tasted fish so good, and the people were so sweet. So if I was going to choose and I can live anywhere, why would I not choose Portugal? It seemed like a very, very nice thing to do.
It's so interesting what you're saying, because Portugal those days, it was on the process of changing from
my visit,
system, and it was a country very conservative. Actually, it still is a very conservative.
Well, let me make a comment, George. When I visited that first time, Portugal was quiet, clean. No one said anything too loud, and the only thing I heard with a little bit of was football, interesting things in football. Otherwise, almost no comments. When I returned in January 1980, it was not the same place that I had visited the first time.
You visit before the changing.
Before the change, yeah. So that was before the revolution. And then when I came, the revolution was something that had recently happened, but it had already happened. And I noticed the difference. When we were having lunch or dinner in places, you could hear everyone talking and carrying on. And oftentimes at a cafe, they would throw something over their shoulder, not even bother if it hit the floor. So I could tell the difference. And the difference also was a positive one in the sense that the people now, you could see their eyes sparkling as they made their commentary. Before, they always were polite. That was not the problem. But there was none of this spontaneous enthusiasm about a moment.
Okay.
So it was a nice, it was
very important what you said, and I want to bring that subject on our conversation.
Okay.
Which is the way people see and understand, because it's a very common word. Everybody preach that word. Politicians, even religion, economy, in all sectors, which is the word freedom.
Yeah.
How do you see freedom those days?
Well,
What is
you have
your
to.
understanding of freedom, and how free do you feel?
Okay. Well, that is freedom. You have to accept that freedom is a very broad potential word to cover many situations. And someone who's lived in very difficult circumstances, a minor change can make you feel free. If you already lived in Southern California, you were more than aware and more, you didn't have to consciously think about freedom. You know you had it. In other words, it wasn't something that someone had to tell you, you're free. Of course you're free, so there, that contrast. When I came to Portugal, my first visit, when everything was quiet, I wasn't here long enough to see if anybody was not feeling free. It was no way for me to make that comment. Why would I say you're free or you're not free? I was not in a position to do that. But after being here now for so many years, the likelihood is that the experience of being free has generated the growth and the union of parts of Portugal that, when I first came here, seemed as if they were pretty separate from each other. Lisbon was a city that reminded me of San Francisco. It was a bridge that looked exactly like the bridge in San Francisco. The hills, you could sit and have a cup of coffee. And if you wanted a different view, all you had to do was turn your head and look another direction, and you had a different view without moving anything else. And that's the same thing in San Francisco. So my first visits to the city of Lisbon were always very nice and reminded me of California. And many people have said, "What? We remind you of California?" And then I had to explain that it was a nice translation of my view. Not that someone may disagree, and it's not an argument. You can, but that was my impression. My impression was that it was a delight to walk on the streets, to have a cup of coffee, to order soup, which, by the way, became more common something to have than I had in the States. And it was pleasant. I think that I would say Portugal was not as free as the States in one sense. The politics, when I came here, I saw that they had many elections that didn't last for long, and then someone else was.
Yeah, it was always changing.
Yeah, there was a lot of that kind of thing going on. And so that told me, and I could not follow the politics nor the language well enough to be able to understand what was going on without someone explaining what they thought. And I wasn't particularly concerned either. I was trying to be a father. I was trying to give my family a chance to experience something different and to see that mankind lives on a planet that is not so big in relationship to the rest of the universe. And that was essentially why I enjoyed making the change. And in the meantime, my new job took me all over the planet. So I was visiting, India, China, the islands. I got to, see the world.
Those experiences that you had and you have been in such different continents and observing different situations.
Yeah.
And for sure, the notions of freedom Uh, I'm not only speaking about freedom of political freedom, you
Yeah.
know,
Okay.
but the individual freedom that one can have when we know who we are,
Yeah.
what is the purpose of life, what one has to do to fulfill and achieve the purpose of life. That kind of
Okay. Well,
freedom.
yeah. You now that's a very actually you're now opening up a huge, huge and important window. Who are we as human beings, and what is our relationship to each other? And the first thing you have to deal with is that you did not choose to be a male or a female. One,
Absolutely.
you didn't choose. You didn't choose.
But I like to be a male.
Yeah, yeah. You didn't choose who your parents were or where they came from. You didn't choose your skin color. You didn't choose most of the things that we identify with being a human being living on planet Earth. And yet, given all of those potential differences, you could not say that whatever those differences were, you were not a human being. You were. And you could feel a commonality, particularly if you saw someone smiling without hearing anything more than seeing a smile. And one of the beautiful things that I found, and I did this actually in China one time, I'd been there several weeks, and I met some Chinese, and we had, of course, an interpreter because I couldn't speak Chinese. And I said to the interpreter, tell the people, and we were in a country setting, that these people reminded me of Portugal, of Portuguese. So the guy looks at me and he says, these are Chinese, obviously. I said, I didn't say that they looked, but they were showing the same niceness, the smile, the look in their eye that I saw when I was in the countryside in Portugal as well. So I saw humanity, while there's obvious differences, all as lovely human beings. And that was one of the nice things about being here and traveling from here around the world.
So important what you have said, because you open a window for me to get to another thing. And
Okay.
that thing that in those days, the day where you had the absolutely freedom to choose the destination for you and your family, of course,
Yeah.
I suppose all together come to that decision, knowing you as I think I know a little bit. The question that I want to say is to bring those days where you had your freedom to choose, and you give that idea of that all human beings are the same, no matter those difference, because that's the nature. What I want to ask you is that now, because this is very important for every generation, I think, for the youngsters who are living today,
Yeah.
for the adulthood that we are living today, and for the seniority which are living today, and the motives that make you took that decision, which is to know new cultures, to give a different experience to your children's, because those days communication was not as today. So today we live in a society where you have the dematerialization of time and space. So
Okay. Yeah.
how that make challenge for people who live today to understand that humankind is one. And
Well, I suppose I had an advantage both in my education and an early introduction to another era, another era, depending on how you pronounce the word, another time for the rapid advancement of science and mankind's experience in that process. Putting a man on the moon in those days was not something that everyone talked about, nor everyone did, and it was unusual. However, it was when we physically, a human being, because you have to not say the name of the man who first stepped on the moon, but a human being was able to stand on a nearby object, a big one, which we call the moon, and look back at a small object in space called Earth. And he, as was a human being, was looking at the home of all human beings that we were aware of. Not each, but collectively. There's no other way you could do it. So when the expression that that first step, one step for mankind, was taken.
Yeah.
So the step that he took on the moon, one step on the moon, was one step for all mankind. And that was an expression that could have probably been said maybe in other settings. But when we took a step for the first step on an island somewhere in the ocean, or the first time that one country sent a boat to open up like Portugal did to see Latin America, we were looking at part of the world. We were never able to see the entire planet until we went far enough away that we could look back and see the entity. All of it.
Yeah, I understand perfectly what you're saying. It's a completely different perspective.
And so that in itself was a big event for whomever was hearing it, seeing it, and being part of it. It just required stopping for a moment and letting your mind say, what is it that just happened? And I couldn't just take a moment. It was part of my life. I was involved in the process. So in that sense, I was very fortunate.
Okay. So how do you see it now?
It's getting even more interesting, because now there are not only myself and the first astronauts, but almost all mankind now has access, just the way we're doing our interview. We have access within a very short amount of time to be anywhere on planet Earth. We can be physically as well as technically.
Okay. The thing that I want to question you, and for you to share with us your sides, is that the advance of technology create new challenge to humankind. As you so well put it. At those moments, how do you think humankind understood that? Because from that moment on, we had quite a relative period, comparing that in the first half of the century, we have two great wars, big wars. But nevertheless, mankind being able to see that we live in the same home, have this new idea, didn't stop that freedom continued to be a menace.
Well, yeah, and when you put it in those terms, I think the way I would state it, that we have begun what is known as a process. The process, if you want to be kind, gentle, forgiving to your neighbor, you begin with your family, your friends, and eventually anyone who is a human being, any dog, any cat, any creature, you all of a sudden realize that we're only a matter of a few hours from any place on the planet. You, of course, have to have the money to buy a ticket to get an airplane to take you there, maybe, but you can go. So that means that we're now connected physically as well as in theory. And that is exactly what I wanted my children to experience. So my 3 children, all of them are grown up and they have children. They all speak Portuguese. English, of course, as well. They live in different parts of the planet. And their children are now becoming adults. And when I celebrated several of my birthdays that I'm now in the 80s, and when they come, I am just thrilled to death. And their friends, who they've grown up with, and many of them are longstanding Portuguese friends. So I have within the family, direct family, members of the family that have been born in different continents and have a different physical look. They're still my family, and I recognize them exactly as my family, and I'm hugged as granddad. And that is part of the dream, and the reason I left has been accomplished. It's very nice. It's very nice. I've been very happy, and I'm also not discouraged, because right now the politics of mankind, and it's whether it's from the east, the west, or the south, or the north, the majority of people from all these areas are nice people. A few people who run business and companies and governments, etc., they still need to be more relaxed and more cooperative with each other. I don't think that they can go to the point where it's useless. I think we are going basically in the right direction.
Well, that's a very positive and optimistic forecasting of the future. And how you
that seems to be the way I've seen how the human beings have dealt with new information.
That's the point that I want to bring. That's the point that I want to bring, because you are one of the persons that I know. I feel so grateful that you came to my life as a friend, and I got to know you. You are someone, first of all, you have the spirit of a young person. That's something then you have that thing so important, that it was the beginning of our conversation, that fantastic smile and laughter that you have all the time.
Thank you.
But that's true, and that brings attraction, that brings magnetism, that brings joy, that brings tolerance, that brings open-minded, that brings, you have, just by being as you are, when you are in connection with people, you only can create. I never saw you create anything but unity.
Well, I have to thank my mother, my father, and my brother and sister.
Okay.
When my father bought a farm on top of a mountain, it was 100 acres. Now, how many hectares is 100 acres? It's something like maybe 300 hectares, something like that. And it was on top of a mountain looking down into a valley called the Hudson Valley. And looking straight down the city of Albany, which is the capital of New York State. Looking to my left, it was Schenectady. In those days, Schenectady was the leader of scientific development. They made light bulbs. They made generators for making electricity. They sold electrical systems to Peru and all of the countries in Latin America so they can hook up to a major electrical system. And all of that was done in the city of Schenectady. And Troy, which was in between Albany and Schenectady, across the Hudson River, it was the university that provided that technical advance because it was the first technical university in the Western world. So I was living happily, learning all about what a cow does every day, twice a day, milking them, and my father giving us 50 cents a week for the cream for his coffee. So we were laughing and talking all the time. Everything that we did, it was a nice experience. My brother and I, and this is it's a minor thing, but a major thing in our lives. My father, we came to the States that for that reason, it was because he was supposed to die right away, and he wanted to say goodbye to his parents. And my mother did not want to just have him go and do that. We all went. We all came. And it turned out that my father read about organic farming. So he had this land that he bought. He's put gardens in. And my brother and I were the ones that planted the seeds. And while he was smoking and eating his, having his coffee, we had to tell him how many insects were on each row. And each row was done differently to see if planting it one way and taking care of it was any change in the number of insects that were on the plants. So
let me just make a note. Let me just make a note, because you're speaking about your father smoking and enjoying his coffee. And as one of the few smokers, and I'm going to have a cigarette.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Because it's such a delight speaking with you. Go ahead, my friend.
Yeah. So in that setting, my brother and sister and I, we were always together because there were no other people. The nearest farm was a mile away for more people. So except during the summertime when people came up because there was a lake and it was all a nice place to be during the summer, so we grew up taking care of each other, and it was done happily.
Okay.
So we all, for instance, you might think I'm an extrovert, just as an example. But when I looked at my brother, my sister, and myself, I was the one in the middle. My brother was the extrovert, my sister was the introvert, and I was the ambivert. I was in between them.
Yeah.
Now, anyone else who meets any one of my brother and sister and myself, we're all extroverts by ourselves. Why? We're not afraid to say hello to anybody. We enjoy stopping and looking at something that, oh, isn't that beautiful? And express ourselves that way. Why? That's the way we grew up.
Fantastic. Just tell me something, because this is very important. So you were raised in a very healthy environment. You was raised with a strong connection between brothers, mother and father.
Yes,
At your educationally accordingly, because your father helped you guys to grow up in the sense of responsibility and discipline.
Yeah, he was also exactly that. He was well-educated, unusual, science-based person.
Okay, so my point is that when you grow and children go to the adventure of their life, adult life, the challenge comes, the difficulties comes. To connect with people is more often the selfishness of that grows in this materialistic world is present every and more and more and more and more. How come you could preserve that joyful way of being, that youth that you still today, I call you a young man. Sometimes when we spoke, I'm the elder guy. You teach
Well,
me
I suppose looking backward, it was the manner in which every day when we arrived in the States, first of all, we had to learn English. And my parents wanted us, of course, to learn English. And my mother that's how my mother and father met. She was Peruvian and he was American, but she spoke English. And she was working for the US Embassy. So they met, and that's the beginning of their relationship. But what happened, living in upstate New York on a farm, isolated, my parents tried to always speak Spanish, let's say in the house, and let us speak English when we're not. But we were not around many people. We were almost always with family. So the learning process, we had to go out of our way to want to speak English. So I can remember my mother and father looking at each other and then agreeing that from now on, they would speak English with us. And when my mother's brothers and sisters came to visit, and my mother was the first of 8 children, then we would be exposed to Spanish. And of course, all of my mother's brothers and sisters could also speak English. But we had a mix of 2 cultures, and dinner lasted for 2 hours at least. Not only did we eat, but my father would talk about books that he was reading and what he was doing. My mother would do the same thing. And the 3 children listened and sometimes were asked our opinion. But it was like having it wasn't really a class. It was a get together over the years that made us feel comfortable with anybody.
And that you endure along your life and pass it on to your children.
Any time that we started to get angry or dissatisfied with any of these things, either my mother or my father or both of them would remind us how lucky we were.
Okay.
And then, because of our personalities, all 3 of us were not introverts, so we could make a joke. We had cats, dogs, and of course there's the chickens and the pigs and the cow, etc. These were all around us, and the ability of all our friends when we were going to school, we had to take a bus that picked us up early in the morning, drove us to a country school, and everybody at the school went on the same bus. The young ones, kindergarten, and the people who were graduating from high school, all were getting on the same bus to go to school because everyone lived all over the countryside. And in that, you had people talking, and most of the time they were joking. And everyone got used to the diversity and being happy and joking about things. And if you live on farms, they all had stories about the cow, the chickens, the dogs, who knows, any number of things. And then occasionally, of course, a wild animal. And where we lived, the wild animal could be something that you would enjoy seeing, but you would not necessarily hope that it would come and stay with you that evening in your bedroom. So we had all of that, and I think that's the way we learned. And I just continued being that way. I was trained that way.
Okay. Do you think this society that we are emerged today where that connection between families, raising children, where fathers and mothers, well, this is the paradoxical thing, because society, as you said, made a huge jump on science and give more facilities for people, but people are more and more observing their in their needs, in their activities, and
Yeah.
you seems to have, you go, in education, fathers almost don't have time to be in a family,
Yeah.
how do you see that challenge, and what could you say to, to
Well,
people who are
not,
raising
I do.
their children?
I say that sometimes we can, by mistake, pay too much attention to that which gives us access to things and not enough time to what the moment can bring that brings you happiness. So, and particularly the people who are becoming rich that came from poverty, people who have never experienced certain kinds of things, all of a sudden, wow, isn't that wonderful? And it takes over your lifestyle. And sometimes it puts you in conflict with other people who live on the same street or in the same town.
Yeah.
And instead of being happy to see some people, some of them you avoid. And mankind, if you look at all of, and luckily I have traveled to a lot of places. My first visit to India, I can always remember it because India is big. The size of the country of India is roughly the size of Western Europe, all of it. The number of people who live there are 3 times more than all of Western Europe.
Well,
And
today population goes to 1.8 billion.
yes, yeah, it's unbelievable, and it's the largest populated part of the planet. I visited, arriving in Delhi. We went north to the foothills of the Himalayas. We went south to the edge, not far from where Portugal had landed on the west coast of India, and the diversity was unbelievable, physically and collectively. And when I left, after seeing such almost beyond my imagination, I've never experienced anything like it at that time. And if they were going to be able to do business with the West, they better start praying for God to help, because I think it was possible to be able to put this kind of situation in a European or an American setting that would allow business to happen easily. And I was totally wrong, because what really happened was that India is one of the miracles. And in the meantime, I've been to India for decades longer. I'm very thrilled. The only thing I would restrict myself regarding India is when I would go. I would go between November and March. Before or after that, it's too hot. And maybe now it isn't as bad, because with the air conditioning and all kinds of things, maybe it's not so bad. But that was the limitation. And then you go to China, then another huge country. I was pleasantly pleased because I went there later. It was decades later before I got to China. But in both of those cases, we as human beings have to agree that we are one family with a lot of diversity, and we have to literally fall in love with the bigger idea of that kind of a family. Otherwise, some things will not work easily, and it takes a lot of effort. And so I am patient in my head and in my heart with the ability for mankind to get united instead of fighting. When I see a bomb go off that takes out buildings, and we have the thing going on right now on TV, you're watching the problem in Israel, or you can see the same problems in other parts of the planet. What good has it been done that you just killed 1,000 people, or you won the city because you blew it up? To use that city again, you have to rebuild everything, and you have new people. So that can't be the solution. Even though when we used to have armies, they could not do what we can do today because of technology.
Very, you give such a, and you bring it with your own story. That's wonderful, because you make the connection between happiness, and you started with a smile. When someone is happy, he has a smile on his face, or on his eye. And each time everyone is watching you, if experience, each time we are happy, we cannot create disharmony.
That's right.
Complete. Yeah. So that is a very interesting thing. I made you 3 questions at the beginning that you have answered already to 2.
Okay. What's the third?
One was, who are we? And you so beautifully put, who are we as human beings? First, having the understanding, living here, but not have the sight, just looking for the moon, just looking for the sky. And then you give us the sight when humankind could, from the sky, look to the earth.
Yeah.
And give
I think that the answer is both simple and complex. And as a scientist, I went with a slide rule to university because my father gave me his slide rule. The slide rule uses a system of adding and subtracting from logarithms. If you add logarithms, if you're using simple numbers, you're multiplying. And if you subtract, you're dividing. And it was within, I would say, in comparison, within minutes that the slide rule went out of style, because you could buy something that I'm holding right now, the sizes that automatically you push the buttons and you could say, this number times this equals this. And then you want to divide it. You can do and it all was there. You were holding it in your hand, and a battery was running it. That came into being very quickly. And when we started Man on the Moon, we had a lot of computers. And the computer that we had were in giant rooms, air conditioned because they had to be a certain temperature. The people who went in and out of some of those areas had to wear special equipment so that they would not spoil the environment. It was a major trip just to go in and out, and not everyone was allowed to go in and out anyway, because that's how it was. Today, I hold in my hand, well, now maybe I should say, more capacity than we had to put, more capacity than we had when we were putting a man on the moon. So all of those advancements reflect the capacity of the human being. And no matter how clever a monkey might be, let alone a cat, a horse, a pig. Pigs, by the way, are pretty intelligent. We humans are not animals. We have the capacity to think and imagine a solution for a problem and do it. No
So
matter how well you can train a monkey to ride a bicycle, and you can, the monkey can't make a bicycle.
let me just add something and then you go on.
Go ahead.
This is something about the human nature that sometimes we forget.
Yeah.
Humankind forget that this. If you put and you speak about that we are not animals.
Yeah.
But we have a lower nature, which is animal nature, and we have a higher nature, which
Yes.
is human nature.
Yeah.
Not only because the faculties of the reason, of the mind, of imagination, of
Yeah.
memory,
The
of
consciousness. Yeah.
abstract thought, solving problems, but what I want to add is this: you put and you live in a farm,
Yeah.
for sure, and you live in a uphill looking down,
Yeah.
and for
Yeah.
sure you have moments where you had your dog, your cat near you.
Yeah.
Okay,
All the time.
I don't know if you had it, but this is the example. If you put a cat to look to the rising sun,
Yeah.
for him is nothing. But if you put a child to look to a rising sun, or even we feel something, we feel beauty.
Yeah. Extraordinary. Yeah.
Extraordinary. So my point is that even humankind have right now achieved such high levels of geniality, creating new things. Well, now it's not going to the moon. We are traveling to new galaxies.
Oh,
So
yeah. I mean, we already
and
have
in
a
a short
telescope that is
and
beyond our
in a
yeah.
short time, but that's connected. I wanted to hear you about this. This connection, who we are, is very much connected to the consciousness that we have something more than reason in one of
Sure.
us.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
and is that something more that makes us appreciate everything is different in creation?
Yeah.
That
Well,
beauty.
one of the things that I would get to when I was doing my little summary here is that in recent science, we have learned that everything is interconnected. Everything is interconnected. No matter how small it is, the nano world never always finds something smaller. And the same thing with bigger. You can never stop either direction. And it isn't that we have not been told that this is the case. Now, this is the trick, and maybe the reason why I can always smile easily. I was very pleased to be able to visit many, many different societies. And the common sense of love and respect that was in the eyes of almost all people. And most of it, I can tell you, I never went to any country in which I did not meet nice people. Some of which I could never speak to because I didn't understand what they were saying. But when they said smile, in other words, when they smiled, because I was wearing clothes that was certainly not what they were wearing. So they knew that I was not a local. So it was obvious. And that particular process has been going on, how to deal with who we are when we're here. And so science is a big source of learning, but so is the role of religion. And its role is to tell you that you're a human and how to act with others.
So
They're not in conflict.
the role, excuse me, the role of religion is to educate the human being.
Yes.
On
to join with science to get a
Okay.
better understanding of reality.
That's fantastic.
Science will never know
Can you
everything right
repeat it
away.
again? Because it's so important and so meaningful. Say it again, please.
Okay. Both religion and science has the purpose of getting to know reality better.
Okay.
Not getting to know reality, period.
And
So,
what is missing
well,
in the humankind to have that understanding? Because it seems that
we have to be curious.
okay.
And that comes, you can see almost every child is curious.
Yes.
Like the same with if you see a cat or a dog or animals. When they're young, they're curious. Why? Because everything is a mystery. They want to find out. They sniff it, they lick it, they get around. And the same thing with babies.
Yes.
And then as the child goes, invariably, if I were right now, it's maybe too late, but if I were in Qashqai shopping and a family walks in, the children, if they're young enough, they're looking around at everything they see because they're curious. Now, mom and dad may be having to go buy something and the child is holding up so that they get pulled a little bit more. That everybody has a learning curve during the process of growing up. What we have to do is allow the education to fulfill the curiosity that we automatically have. And there's not a conflict. The information in science is not designed to have scientists from Portugal fighting with scientists from Spain or scientists from America fighting with scientists from Canada. The scientific community agrees that once a principle has been thought about, experienced, and the theory has been validated, all scientists must agree. Okay,
So,
that dominates the process of scientific education. Now, where the scientists don't deal with which is science, they don't deal with the human side of things. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself, that type of thing, be kind, be generous, etc. That's the role of religion.
okay.
And the word religion in today's world, I would not use very often because it creates a problem, not a solving a problem. It creates a problem. You have groups of people who are fighting each other in the name of religion. And it can't be the case. How can that process create problems? It should be solving problems, not creating problems.
So it is a wrong understanding.
Yes, it's a wrong understanding. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with science. If you don't catch up and you apply a scientific principle that is outdated, you may make a major mistake in doing that, particularly because everything else is advanced. If you, it's like saying, I know you need wings to fly, so I'm going to tap myself and pretend I have wings and jump out the window. And it's a long way down, and I'm going to die if I do it because it isn't the wings don't work. It's that you have to do more than have the making looking like wings. You have to have the right design for the wings to work.
Absolutely.
And there's a science that deals with the wing. The wing actually it creates the velocity of air going over the top versus the velocity of the air going under is different. And that creates a difference in pressure, which lifts.
So what you are saying is that the more people are educated on the way to a better understanding of reality, and that comes from education.
That's right.
And not only the education that comes from science, let's say it like that, but a different kind of education also that shows who are the human beings, that
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, each one of them has inside of his himself, the potentiality,
Absolutely.
so qualities and virtues.
That's right.
Everyone has it.
Everyone has it, and it's applicable to all human beings, no matter where they come from.
That's the point where it comes, and that's why I love you as a person and as a human being and as a friend, of course.
Yes, yeah.
Because I understand there is another part that we haven't talked about it, and I will talk it because I see it in your behavior, in your way of, and behavior means for me character, deeds, and words. All of them are together, and you are a person that I see all the time, and I learn how to appreciate and observe, engage in a very misunderstood word too, as religion. You know what? I'm going to jump.
Yeah. Go ahead. Continue.
That is service.
Yeah. Well, service is, it turns out.
I see that on you. So now,
but
you
dear,
have to tell to our listeners and our friends that's going to why I can see this.
Yeah, but but what we share and what we do by service, it's most of the time we serve our loved ones.
Okay.
And we're now living in which you will probably never meet the people who provide most of the food that you eat on a daily basis. So you cannot be kind to them directly. Who you meet are the people who are selling it to you. So you should be kind to them as well. The magnitude of being kind to a fellow human being includes collective as well, because it's impossible. It's so complex, which makes the human being why we're not animals. We can do more things more productively in a larger scale, that it is impossible to know everyone that provided you with a service on a daily basis. So you then have to give that sense of appreciation and serve anyone you meet. Okay? Because otherwise it's impossible to say, I only want to do this for the people who are directly helping me. You don't know who are all the people on a daily basis who are directly helping you be who you are. It's impossible.
That's what you're saying, because you're touching another word that we need to, as you so well put it, we need to continue the process of learning.
And always.
That word is service is connected to love.
That's right. Yeah.
So when one and love, that's major, because we have war because we have the war Ukrainian with Russia.
Yeah.
The Russians have the love to their land.
They want to say that Ukraine belongs to them.
And Ukraine has the love to their land, to defend them. The thing is that something is missing, because that provokes conflict. So the love of a political party, the love of a football team, the love of ideology, the love of that cannot give that idea or that understanding of who we are and the purpose of life in order to to create unity, because we cannot see love on the one which is different from us,
Yeah.
or we are in competition.
Yeah.
What do
Okay.
you?
Now, so you have another thing that happens as you grow up. You are able to be a happy child, but you have to obey your mom and dad, even when they ask you to do something that you're not particularly interested in doing. And the children have to learn that one day they will be mom and dad and will have children. What happens is, as that kind of interrelationships grow to see a city, to see the world that way, you have to agree on sets of rules of how you behave under certain conditions. And if we look at, let's just take Ukraine right now. Ukraine was declared Ukraine by a group of people in the government, in the agency of Europe, that said as of this date, the members of the Soviet Union who are, and they mentioned all the separate countries, Ukraine being one of them, and Russia being one of them, and it ends up Russia maintained the largest physical area of any country on planet Earth. Not only was the section that was part of Europe, but all of it right to the other side of the Pacific. In fact, that side is next door to Alaska, which is United States. And Alaska used to be part of the Soviet Union. That's where the Americans bought Alaska from the Russians. We bought the big section of the United States that's west of the Mississippi from the French. That was a French territory.
Your point?
The point is that we also have to agree collectively to obey how we're managed to maintain security and love at the same time. We have to appreciate that there are certain things that I am obligated to obey so that I can make it safe for others to live. For instance, I like to drive my car at 200 kilometers an hour. And I have a big engine. Let's just say I can, but I'm not allowed to. Not because my car won't do it, because I'm endangering other people. And it's a government policy to make the roads safe and available. So I have to learn that some things I may want to do it differently, but I have to be happy doing it the way it's designed. So that is a big issue that we're watching on a day-to-day basis right now, is how we decide what's appropriate to do. And on planet Earth, the concept of the United Nations states a very interesting, beautiful thing. We can identify Portugal as a part of one of the nations that live on planet Earth. We don't have to contest it. It's a map is there. It's been agreed upon, and it's got a history. And we can do the same thing with Spain and France, et cetera, all over the planet. And if we can just allow the unity and diversity of the nation state with an overall governance, so that wind that blows, it blows over everybody. So weather is not something that belongs to any one country. So therefore, the weather forecast we all live by, protect, help, or enjoy weather anywhere. Portugal is one of the beautiful places that it's summertime for some people all the time. If you live way up north, I can tell when I walk down the street in this area, if I'm wearing an overcoat and someone is walking down the street wearing a t-shirt, they're probably visiting from Germany or from Norway.
So in your point of view, and I think you mentioned about order,
Yeah.
about discipline. So what we are observing right now is that the order is becoming disorder
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
places in the world. So we are on the process of humankind, sooner or later, because the menaces that humankind make to themselves are huge. You mentioned the weather, this climatic transformation that is occurring because of the way that man cannot see that his home is his planet and needed to cherish and preserve it and respect it and love it. So what are for you, through your experience, how do you see the next years? Because the process is becoming so rapidly, the changes are more
Yeah.
and
Well, I see us in what I would call transition.
okay.
It's impossible for us not to be a cooperative working group that lives on the same planet. And we already are functioning that way. Almost any automobile that you can buy, the parts are made in different parts of the planet. No matter what the name of the brand. The same thing with almost every technical thing. And now we're now what is now known as, this is one of the biggies that are coming right now that we're going to have to deal with as well. And that is what is now AI.
Mm-hmm.
Artificial intelligence is nothing more and nothing less than the capacity to investigate all kinds of information, store it, use it rapidly and incisively. How we do is then has to be wisdom. And wisdom states, and it should be considered by anybody, a wise thing to do because it makes me safe and happy. And if it makes me safe and happy, it makes other people safe and happy. And if other people are safe and happy, then the world can be safe and happy.
Well, my dear friend, it was such a delight, this conversation. And good conversations are like cherries. The Portuguese, that you know, the cherries that we eat.
Yeah, I love the cherries. Yeah, and in fact, they're now. If you go to Pedro Pinheiro on the way, you can buy fresh ones.
Yeah, yeah. So we couldn't end it for now with such elevated thought and hope and and positivity, facing reality, that we have it as something.
No, it's for sure. It's the future with patience is going to be good.
It was an amazing, and I want to thank you very, very much for being with us in my podcast.
Okay, in this case, meo prazer.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to say goodbye for now.
Okay.
And thank you so much for
thank you for taking the time to talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.